If there's the new coach or GM, what exactly are they getting when they get the Jacksonville Jaguars? I'll start by telling you exactly who that is in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. Glad that you could join us here today on the Locked On Jaguars podcast, and it can be found wherever you get your podcast, wherever you watch your podcast, wherever you listen to them. Make sure you tap into that location each and every day. Today's show is sponsored by FanDuel. That's right. FanDuel is our sponsor for today, and you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're going to get started right here on Locked On Jaguars. Shout out to the everydayers who join me here every day. Here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to end up talking about what the team needs and can get in this offseason. Premium spots filled for the Jacksonville Jaguars offense for whoever may take over this team, and pieces to build with. That's where we're going to get this thing on the road. The Jaguars have some decent pieces. I'll just more or less talk about position groups. They have a lot of the bases covered. So just to give you a little heads up, this is not going to be totally my opinion of those players. It's more or less going to be who the team has financially committed to. And I know it may be a difference if they get a new GM and a new coach, but not really. If a team commits to somebody financially, 9 times out of 10, if they make that investment, the person that you see is the person that's paid. The person that's gotten paid is the person that you're probably going to see in those positions. And it's also something that you could look at where you could say it entices a coach. I'm sure if there are multiple candidates or candidates that will have multiple opportunities, they're going to look and see, how hard the work is. Or not, they're not going to run from the grind, but they'll use their ability to win and to win fast. They'll use that with looking at what's on the roster to decide maybe if they'll take one job or another. There's going to be a lot of things that people pay attention to, but this is just one of them. Obviously, the structure of the front office and the infrastructure of the team and the way that they vibe, they were able to vibe with the owner or GM, or if we're talking about a GM, the way that he'll be able to jive with the owner and how much power he has. All those things being equal, what happens is they also take a look at the roster. They know how they want to coach. They know how they want to line up. I'm sure they're going to look at it and see, hey, man, how much is this is close to what we need, or do we have to go on a big undertaking of flipping all this talent around? So the parts that I'm going to talk about are the universal parts that fit regardless of scheme, regardless of how you align, and all of those things. So that's where I'm at with it, and we're going to get started with it. Quarterback, they got a quarterback. I think outside of a few opinions of some former players that are they get kind of loud now about this subject. I do believe that Trevor Lawrence is somebody that coaches still believe that they can win with, and that's what's important. So the quarterback position, in my opinion, with Trevor Lawrence is something that is an attractive situation for a potential coach. I really believe that. Now, I even listen to former players talk about whether or not he's the real deal and all of this stuff. They don't matter. The only people that matter are football coaches. And I think, especially with a guy like Liam Cohen, I'm sure that he looks at Trevor Lawrence's talent and said, man, I could do wonders with that. And I'm sure people said the same thing about Jared Goff. And then you look at how Jared Goff is playing. Gone are the days, man, and I'm glad it's gone. Gone are the days when they're drafting dudes to be the next Patrick Mahomes. I mean, they had Tom Brady right in their face for 20 years, and people had the audacity to see Patrick Mahomes and then all of a sudden say, well, that's the new thing. We want that. And now you got Patrick Mahomes probably out of necessity playing more like Tom Brady is now. Oh, well, it was. He's Patrick Mahomes is now playing more like Tom Brady. And guys like Jared Goff, they're playing like Tom Brady. So he had all of these years to try to find the Tom Brady, and then you had 3 or 4 years of Patrick Mahomes, and all of a sudden, boom, we got to find the next Patrick Mahomes. Like, you can't find the next LeBron James. You can't find the next Michael Jordan. You can't find the next Kobe Bryant. They have to find you. And until then, you just need to run your team like a football team's supposed to be run. You got to put parts around people and put everything in place, and then I call it insulate that quarterback so his talent can come out. And the Jaguars haven't done a good enough job with Trevor, but I think most people look at Trevor and say we could do something with that. It's a lot of talk the last couple of days about the bookends on the offensive line. I think the offensive line has been the most troublesome part of this regime. They don't think so. So that's why I said I'm going to take out this whole opinion piece about the offensive line. What have they committed to? They've committed to a young right tackle and a young left tackle. The right tackle we thought was a future left tackle, and the left tackle in Walker Little we thought was the heir apparent to the right tackle position a couple of years ago, and he wasn't. So it's really strange to me. And when you look at it in a vacuum, it'll be strange to you to say, is Walker Little at $15 million better than Jawan Taylor at 20? I mean, 2 years later, yeah, but they don't keep Jawan Taylor at 20 million, but they keep Walker Little at 15. The body of work says that Jawan Taylor was a better player when they decided not to keep him than Walker Little was or is when they decided to keep him. But that's water under the bridge. But that's just part of my process, and I go through this and I'm like, we can give Trent praise all we want to, but at some point, you got to look at it and say, they're 2-10 for a reason. So go back and look at some of the things that they've done and try to figure that out, right? And that's where I'm at with that. But the offensive line, they're going to, the bookends are already settled. That's set. They also like their left guard, Ezra Cleveland, more than I do. But the prevailing thought is if they're going to have to do something on the offensive line, it's going to be right guard and probably center. Since Mitch Morse will only have one more year. And by the way, him having one more year means the guy he's in front of has one more year too, right? The backup center, the guy everybody wanted out of the lineup for so long. I can't even remember his damn name because I ain't called his name a lot this year, but his contract will run out when Morse's contract runs out. Oh, quit playing, man. Luke Fortner. I'm talking about Luke Fortner. Yeah, so Luke Fortner's contract will run out. So if they need to make the offensive line more dominant, and what I'm talking about is not just to be able to just say you can line up. I'm talking about winning and competing. And I'm not necessarily saying winning a Super Bowl. Obviously, that's the goal, but that's not where I'm at for this conversation. For this conversation, I'm talking about just being able to put yourself in the dance to have a chance in the playoffs to see what will happen, right? I just do think the offensive line needs to improve. So that's improvement at both right guard, center, and then work on that left guard a little bit too. They should acquire 3 offensive linemen in the offseason and make it a competition. I don't even look at a starting 5. I say you got to get a starting 6 or a starting 7. So if they have 4 now, they need to invest in 3 more and then let competition take over. We'll talk more about some things, premium spots on this team and things that you can build with. And then we'll talk about the team needs and things that they need to go out and try to get. We'll do all of that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month, when you purchase a 3-month plan, that's exactly what they mean. So say bye-bye, like my grandson says, to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. To get this new customer offer, your new 3-month premium wireless plan for $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedon NFL. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month. mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. Now, $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And today's show is also sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. You want to get paid, man, you can, even when your team's bad. Just go more or less than on player stat projections, and you have a shot to winning up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Here's what you do, man. You pick between 2 and 6 player projections, and you can get paid on Prize Picks like millions of people do every single week. What you do is download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. I'll repeat it. It's Locked On NFL, all one word, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup on Prize Picks. Prize Picks. Run your game. And I'm running it down here on Locked On NFL. It's your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen. Going over the spots that the Jaguars have secured. Like I said, I'm taking my opinion out of it in terms of whether or not I think those players are good enough. But for the sake of this, who have they committed to, and what does a future GM or future coach have to look at to say that he can or cannot work with, and what do they have to do? And eventually we're going to get to what they can possibly acquire. Look at a little free agency and draft speed through. All right, we talked about the quarterbacks, we talked about the bookend linemen. Now we'll get to skill positions. Running back 1 and 2, that's done. It's done. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw them add another player, a day 3 type guy, or 2. Big, it depends on who comes in, but I think what you'll need is big physical guy who can also pass catch. What you'll need is a young version of Samaj P. Ryan, right? To add into that room and make that room complete. I mean, you got lightning with Travis Etienne. You got a combination of thunder and lightning with, of course, with the Tank Bigsby. Now, I think you'll get a combination of both. Another complete player at running back, guy who can play in short yardage, who can catch, who's a good pass protector, who gives you a little bit of that. And then they might double back and get another little fast dude who can play special teams. Or they may like Keelan Robinson. We'll see what he can do now that he's been activated. But somebody like that can also be a kick returner, that can be a dangerous threat. Maybe a Justice Hill type. But I don't think you go looking for specific types. But I do think with running backs, you can look at the various types of running backs that are in the draft that will be available to you from the 4th and 5th round, and find out exactly what those guys do well and see if it could be a part of your program here in Jacksonville. So I think now we look at quarterback, the bookends, and then the 1-2 at running back, that's done. Tight end, 1-2 at tight end is done with how they picked and the way that Brenton Strange has progressed this year. And Evan Ingram. I still want them to get another dude in the tight end department, and you can do this on day 2 or day 3. Get a guy that's a combination of both of them. Like Evan Ingram isn't a great blocker, but he's like a glorified wide receiver. Brenton Strange is one of the things that he does is block, but he's actually been a better catcher this year. So now you go out and find a dude that's a combination of both. Somebody you can put into the game in either one of those situations, and there's a boatload of those dudes out there. I'd love the guy from Penn State, but I think he's going to be a day 2 guy. But yeah, you could even go and look on the veteran market and find someone, but there's a bad veteran free agent market for tight ends. So I wouldn't necessarily bank on that, but they're pretty good in that respect. Wide receiver, I think they have wide receiver 1, obviously, in Brian Thomas Jr. And then I think you get down, they probably have wide receiver 4 in Parker Washington. I know I'm going to get some flack for that. There's a lot of people that believe Parker Washington could be a starting slot or wide receiver 3. Wide receiver 4 ain't bad because I think Parker Washington actually can play all of those positions. But what I'm talking about is, here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that Gabe Davis, I don't think he should be in the future plans of anybody here, and or be a make or break why you would take a job and think that you're cool in that respect. Also, uh, Christian Kirk is somebody I probably move on from. So for me to be a contending team, I think Parker Washington's your 4th receiver, which is good. We all know who the number 4 receiver is on every team around the National Football League and the teams that we've always covered. I think that's not a bad spot. Play him on special teams. Also, have him as one of your punt returners, one of your kick returners like you do now. And then he's also a guy that in a pinch can come in and play either one of those receiver positions. 4th receiver is a guy that plays football here, period. But I think they need wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3. I'd go out and find me another Brian Thomas Jr. If they trade down in the draft, I wouldn't be surprised if they took Luther Burden. Get as many of those dudes that put pressure on the other team as you can. Get as many of those guys that you think can be playmakers and guys that you'll have to give second contracts to. Don't stop with just one real good receiver. I probably wouldn't spend the money on free agency on T. Higgins. I just probably wouldn't commit that much bread. But I would go get another young player. I think at the top of the second round, there are going to be some really good wide receivers. You can't get everything in the draft, but I would definitely, if I go out and spend some draft capital on wide receiver, it's going to be before day 3. It's going to be in day 2. I wouldn't even be mad if they went double on day 2. If they somehow managed to get an extra pick and take 2 second-round wide receivers to go with BTJ. I think they'll have a chance to do that. But I do think it has to be addressed. So far on offense, we're mainly talking about 3 offensive linemen, 2 starters, and 2 wide receivers, like wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 types. Obviously, you let Parker compete. And if he holds them off, he holds them off. But that's how you get better. That friction leads to, I always say, that friction leads to combustion, and then that combustion leads to propulsion, meaning you take off, right? All right, we'll get to segment 3 here and finish this conversation up over on the defensive side of the ball, and then tell you exactly what I believe the team can probably accomplish in both free agency as well as the draft. We'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats and view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, thank you for joining me again here on Locked On Jaguars. Talking about what the team has that could attract other coaches and GMs to wanting this job, and things that they could check off as a part of this team being pretty good. So on offense, we did a pretty good job. Let's finish over on defense. The things that the Jaguars have, they have 2 starting edges. They need depth. They need another rotational edge. Your third edge rusher is almost as important as your third corner, because the people have gotten to the point where they play them all at the same time now. You got guys lining up in A-gap, guys rushing the pass from all over the place. Your third edge rusher has to be a dude that can play. It can't be a throwaway position like people used to do for special teams. Can't just be some rookie you feel good about. They need a bona fide sack go-getter. They need Yannick Ngakoue in his prime. That's what they need. That third guy makes a lot of money. and the Jaguars need to get one. So we're going to put a sack maker, a guy that can eventually push by the time he gets to the end of his contract for a contract extension that you re-sign. That would mean day one, day two of the draft. I don't think you're going to find a guy in free agency and be able to pay him $7, $8, $9 million to be a backup. That usually doesn't happen unless you go out and get a veteran. And maybe there's some guys that'll fit that, but I would be looking towards the draft, and I would be looking towards day one or day two. So, day one and day two is going to be busy. So y'all know I'm hitting at the Jaguars trading down unless they get a great player at one of these other positions. Like one of them, I think they need help. I think they need a big-time defensive tackle, and Mason Graham is right there. He will be right there for the Jaguars to snatch him up if that's what they want to do. They have a good Mike linebacker, and they have good off-ball linebackers, who, whichever one you want to look at, whether it's 2 or 3 linebacker system. Devin Lloyd, you can take your pick, Devin Lloyd, or in my opinion, I like Ventrell Miller a lot, but Foye Oluokun is the star of the show in the linebacker room. So you have Foye Oluokun. That's something that you have. You also have 3 other linebackers that provide good competition and good depth. I wouldn't bother it too much. Maybe touch it up with one person, because you really have a 5-man linebacker room, somebody that can play special teams and somebody that can down the line, because like you have Devin Lloyd and both him and Chad Muma, and they'll both be in the last year of their contract, especially if Lloyd doesn't get a 5th-year option. So maybe having a dude already in the fray, you get him this year if he's a good enough player. Maybe you can find another dude on day 3 of the draft that you bring in and create some more competition. Cornerback 1, they got Tyson Campbell. Whether you're going to consider him one or not, I think he's a starter in this league if he stays healthy, but they've already committed to him. So that's the way we'll look at that. On the other side, I don't think the commitment to Darnell Savage has been big enough for them to not go out and get somebody else who can play that position. I think they like Jarian Jones a lot. So he's a candidate to succeed at that nickel position. I think he can also play outside a little bit. I think they like Monteric Brown, but make no mistake about it, I think they need another starter. And I'm looking at Charvarius Ward in free agency, and I'm wondering if they'll do that, if they'll pay another big-time corner to come in here and compete and be to have 2 high-priced cornerbacks in free agency. That's kind of hard to do from a veteran standpoint. But they'll also be drafting in a prime position where they can take either Travis Hunter or William Johnson. So the first pick is lining up real well for the Jaguars in the draft to be able to get somebody that they really, really need. But they're going to have to make a decision before the draft, because free agency comes before the draft. So what can they get and what do they need? Well, we've discussed that they need a defensive tackle. They need safety. They really, really need a starting safety. I think they can address that in free agency. And that's one position where I don't mind them spending money in free agency. If you're going to get a Trayvon Merrick or a Javon Holland, 2 guys that people were screaming for them to take when they came out in the draft, they're both probably going to hit the free agents market. That's worth overpaying for if you're Jacksonville. It has been shown that free safety is the spot in the league where a lot of guys have been given a lot of money in free agency. It hasn't wrecked the team. In fact, it has made the team a lot better. Jesse Bates is one of them. It is very, very difficult that once you get a dude like that to let him go. But now in Jacksonville, Andre Cisco just hasn't panned out. I actually think Cisco will be better off at strong safety, but I don't think the Jaguars are going to keep him. I think they're going to let him test free agency because he also has been banged up. I think he's better in the box and playing closer to the line of scrimmage because of his physicality, because of his size, but he can also give you something in coverage. I just don't really like him as much as I thought I would as a free safety. But he'll be the one from that 2021 draft. He'll be the one that's the one of those day 1 or 2 picks. He'll be the only one that probably doesn't re-sign because they re-signed Walker Little, they re-signed Tyson Campbell, and they re-signed Trevor. So that leaves Andre Cisco is probably the one top pick from that year that won't get a deal done if they don't do it. And I don't think they're going to do it. So they need corner. They need safety. I say two starters in the secondary. Depth at linebacker. They need a starting maniac on the interior of the defensive line. They're going to have a chance to do that in both free agency and the draft. Probably a better chance in the draft. A better chance to get a corner in either the draft or free agency. But when they do that, that's going to telegraph what they won't grab. So if they grab a corner in free agency, that would probably preclude them from picking a corner in the draft. That would tell you if they have the number 1 pick or the number 3 pick, that would tell you they're probably not going to take Travis Hunter. They're probably not going to take Will Johnson. And then you can start narrowing it down because they're not going to take a tackle either. I don't think a tackle is going to be worthy. They're not going to take a quarterback. Possibilities. Tretoria McMillan, the big wide receiver, to play opposite. He'll give you a Mike Evans body to play opposite of Brian Thomas Jr. He's a possibility. So Mason Graham is a possibility. I think it's better to get a young guy like that in. Both of these positions are going to cost you a whole bunch of money in free agency. You get the biggest bang for your buck if you take these dudes. Now you can also take Travis Hunter and play him at wide receiver. I prefer him at corner, but you can take him and have that explosiveness, that ability of a guy who can change everything just like that. So that's the way it's looking in terms of what they can do. The guard position can be addressed in free agency, and you can do that because you're not paying your tackles a whole bunch of money, right? You can address that with Trey Smith and some other players that are out there. It's worth y'all taking a look at some of these free agency guards. And then you can double back on that on day 2 or day 3. If you take the corner or the defensive tackle or the wide receiver in the draft, you can double back on that on day 3. So there's a lot to work with. There's some things that can be worked with here in Jacksonville for a new GM. I want you to go through it. Go through it. Just take your personal feelings out of it and look at what has been committed to already. And you have to do that whether or not you think if you have a lot of things that need to be changed, you ain't going to fix. If you're the first year coach or first year GM, you ain't going to fix it all in 1 year. So you kind of look at what you have and you say, okay, are these building blocks? Are these things that I can go out here and win with? The things that I can add? What can I do? How can I get the best player in free agency or players in free agency, and then get the best player or players in the draft and add them to this to make this? Don't look at it like a 1-year deal, but look at it like, okay, it's not a 1-year deal, but these are guys that are under contract that I believe we can win with. And we add these new guys to it, probably 6 or 7 new starters for Jacksonville, I would assume. 2 on the offensive line, at least 1 wide receiver, a defensive tackle, a corner and a safety. Corner, safety, defensive tackle. Yeah, there you go. 2 offensive line, a wide receiver. That's 6. So maybe we could get a 7 starter or be a guy who plays sort of like a starter, like you would a slot, like maybe that would be your 3rd edge rusher, or maybe they double up at safety. But whatever they do, the Jaguars are going to have a lot of choices and a lot of currency to be able to do it. We're just concerned about who's going to be the ones pulling the trigger. All right, you can check me out on Locked On NFL. Also, we talk about everything around the NFL. It's a show that comes on twice a day, once in the morning with Tyler, the Madman Roland, and then me in the middle of the day in the barbershop. Swing on through and check out Locked On NFL wherever you listen or get your podcasts. All right, crossover with Tyler Rowland. I mentioned his name, man. Crossover with Crazy Tyler Rowland tomorrow here on Locked On Jaguars as the Jaguars and the Texans get ready to go and do battle this weekend. The boy tried to say we some ugly cousins or something like that. So you listen out for that and see what I told him. All right, man, y'all take care of each other. I'll do the same here in my studios in North Jacksonville. And we'll see you tomorrow here on Locked On Jaguars.